Dead America. Tales from New York. The Office Building. By Derek Slayton. Day 0+1. 6:35 a.m. High above the bustling streets of Manhattan, on the 35th floor of a towering office building that scraped the sky with 44 stories, 6 weary office workers gathered around a conference table. Fatigue etched lines on their faces, and the telltale signs of another sleepless night lingered beneath their bloodshot eyes. At one end of the table sat 2 women, Ashlyn, a petite blonde, and Sasha, whose lithe figure was framed by long, dark hair. Their struggle against exhaustion was evident as they methodically sifted through a mountain of paper files, their weary gazes shifting between the documents and the spreadsheets open on their respective laptops. Opposite them sat 2 young men, Dominic and Trevor, both possessing the sculpted physiques of regular gym-goers. Like their female counterparts, they were buried beneath stacks of papers, their expressions a mix of determination and weariness. Pacing restlessly between the 2 groups was Conrad, a man in his early 40s whose haggard appearance betrayed a soul worn down by years of relentless toil. A conspicuous bald spot atop his head hinted at the toll taken by stress and long hours. The final member of the team, Bruce, a slender 20-year-old, occupied a corner of the room, clad in an ill-fitting suit. As a first-year intern, he kept a low profile, his presence marked by silence as he performed the menial tasks assigned to him, fetching coffee, running errands for his superiors. "Come on, people," Conrad urged, his voice tinged with frustration. "The answer is in these documents. We just have to find it." "We've been at this all night, Conrad," Ashlyn protested, her tone reflecting the exhaustion weighing heavily upon her. Sasha chimed in, her words tinged with resignation. "If the answer is here, it's certainly well hidden." Both of the women sank back into their chairs, their expressions resigned. Sasha tossed a pen onto the table, a clear gesture of surrender. "We got this," Conrad declared with a hint of desperation in his voice. "Our floor is missing $500,000, and we have to find it before the meeting." He paused, glancing at his watch, a shake of his head betraying his dismay. "The meeting starts in less than an hour." "It's just not here, Conrad," Dominic interjected, his tone weary. "Yeah, are you sure you did the math right in the first place?" Trevor added skeptically. "I did the math 3 times and came up $500,000 short every single time," Conrad insisted. "Well, I don't know what to tell you, boss," Sasha replied with a shrug. "If the money is missing, it isn't from our group." "But it has to be," Conrad exclaimed, his hand slamming down on the table, causing everyone to jump in surprise. He quickly composed himself, raising his hands in a conciliatory gesture. I'm sorry, he apologized, his tone softer now. "I know you're all working hard, and I appreciate it. Let's take 5, then give it one more look, just so I can tell the higher-ups that we gave it our all." The foursome exchanged glances, nodding in unison as they pushed back from the table. Dominic reached for his phone, powering it on, and was visibly taken aback by what he saw, emitting an impressed whistle. "What is it, Dominic?" Trevor inquired, curious. 57 unread messages, Dominic revealed, holding up his phone for Trevor to see. Trevor echoed Dominic's whistle, equally impressed. They didn't bother opening the messages, merely noting that they were from various female contacts. 57. "That's a new record, isn't it?" Trevor remarked with a grin. "I think this one takes second place," Dominic replied with a smirk. "When did you have more?" Trevor probed. 2 years ago, Game 7 at the Garden. 126 messages, Dominic recalled. "Okay, let me rephrase. 57 is the new record for women, isn't it?" Trevor clarified with a chuckle. "By a long shot. Only had 1 woman text for the game. Guess who got the extra ticket?" Dominic quipped. "Hey, wait a damn minute," Sasha interjected, her tone incredulous. "I texted you for that game, and I sure as hell didn't get to go." "Yeah, but if we all whipped them out, you'd have the second biggest one in the room," Dominic countered with a smirk. Sasha pondered for a moment before chuckling and nodding in agreement. Yeah, I bet old Trevor there would give me a run for my money. She said that with a grin, prompting Trevor to playfully smack his buddy Dominic on the arm as the room erupted into laughter. Amidst the laughter, Ashlyn glanced over, noticing the first rays of sunlight peeking over the horizon and filtering into the conference room. Oh, good Lord, it's morning already, Sasha exclaimed, her voice tinged with exhaustion. I'm sorry, everybody. I know you probably had better things to do than sit with my fat ass all night, Conrad apologized, his tone tinged with self-deprecation. Ashlyn responded with mock sarcasm, her words dripping with irony. What? A bunch of hot young 20-somethings with plans in the big city? No, of course not, Conrad. We live to dig through spreadsheets for someone else's screw-up. Conrad stood there silently, allowing Ashlyn to vent her frustration. 10 years ago, back when he still cared, he would have lashed out at her. But nowadays, after being passed over for so many promotions, he was merely going through the motions, collecting a paycheck to buy a bottle of something to drown his sorrows in. I tell you what, to make it up to you, let me buy you breakfast, Conrad offered. Yeah, well, it doesn't get you all the way there, but it's a start, Ashlyn replied with a hint of sarcasm. Conrad turned his attention to Bruce, pulling out his wallet. Get over here, intern. My name is Bruce, sir, the intern corrected nervously. How long have you been here, intern? Conrad questioned. 7 months, sir, Bruce replied. You're not allowed to have a name until you last a year here. Do you have any idea how many interns don't see a calendar flip? Conrad's tone was stern. Well, no, sir, I don't, Bruce admitted. Well, let me tell you, intern. It happens so often around here that if I remembered every new intern's name, I wouldn't have any room in my head for anything else, Conrad explained bluntly. Conrad retrieved $40 from his wallet, handing it over to the young intern. Now, I want you to head down to the cafeteria. You know where that is, right? Conrad inquired. It's on the 20th floor, sir, Bruce replied promptly. Very good. You've learned a lot in your 7 months here, intern. Now the coffee place should be open by now. Hand them this money and order 6 large coffees, black like the hole in my soul. Also, I want you to get a dozen hot breakfast sandwiches, just a mix of them. It doesn't really matter as long as they're hot, Conrad instructed. Bruce stood there for a moment, examining the money in his hand, his mind racing with calculations. Sir, I don't think $40 is going to be enough for that order, Bruce pointed out cautiously. Conrad's gaze hardened, his eyes locking onto Bruce with an intensity that made the intern squirm slightly. Do you have a wallet, intern? Conrad asked, his tone sharp. Confused, Bruce nodded in affirmation. Yes, sir. Is there money in that wallet? Conrad pressed on. Yes, sir, Bruce confirmed. Then I fail to see the problem, intern. Your job is to get things done, no matter the expense to your health or finances. Now, get moving before too many others beat you to the punch, and show us how badly you want to be a part of this team, Conrad concluded firmly. Bruce took a moment, swallowing what little pride remained as he slunk away towards the elevators, located directly across from the conference room on the other side of the floor. Damn, Conrad, being a little harsh to the kid, aren't you? Sasha remarked. If he's going to survive in this industry, he needs to either accept that life is going to suck, or he needs to walk away. Either way, I'm doing the kid a favor, Conrad defended his approach. Damn, I'm glad you weren't my boss when I was an intern. If you were, I don't think I would have stayed. Ashlyn commented wryly. Which means you would have been out enjoying the city last night instead of looking for a phantom $500,000, Trevor added with a chuckle. Ashlyn paused, her expression turning somber as she realized the truth of Trevor's words. A few of the younger employees laughed at her realization. As they did, the faint sounds of the elevator dinging echoed in the background. A moment later, they were startled by Bruce's screams of terror and pain. "Oh, what the hell is wrong with that intern?" Conrad exclaimed. "Holy shit." Trevor exclaimed in shock as he and Dominic bolted out of the conference room, sprinting down the long aisle towards Bruce. As they approached, horror gripped them as they saw three figures atop Bruce, viciously attacking him. Two assailants clung to his legs while another had a firm grip on his arm. Dread washed over them as they realized the attackers were tearing chunks of flesh from Bruce's body. "Jesus Christ," Dominic muttered, his voice tinged with horror. Both men looked around frantically, seeking any means of defense. Trevor seized a metal trash can from nearby, while Dominic swiftly tore the blade off a paper cutter, readying themselves to confront the horrifying scene unfolding before them. By the time they turned back to Bruce, they watched helplessly as the creature on his arm latched onto his neck, ripping out a large chunk of flesh. Reacting swiftly, Trevor darted forward first, swinging the solid metal trash can upwards with all his strength. The makeshift weapon connected with the head of the throat zombie, knocking it backward onto one of the leg zombies. The other leg creature released its grip on Bruce, rising to its feet and sprinting toward Trevor. With a swift tackle, it brought Trevor down, the two of them tumbling onto the floor. Trevor fought back, managing to position his hands defensively, holding the creature at bay by its chest. Dominic wasted no time, swinging the broken blade as hard as he could. The weapon embedded into the side of the zombie's head, dropping it to the ground. Trevor quickly regained his footing as the other two creatures continued to feed on Bruce. Stunned and struggling to find their words, Trevor and Dominic exchanged a brief, horrified glance. As the creatures finished devouring another piece of flesh, they turned their attention to the two men standing in the aisle. Trevor and Dominic swiftly got into a defensive position, bracing themselves as the zombies sprinted towards them, their primal instincts kicking into high gear. With swift agility, Trevor ducked down and stepped forward, managing to slide his arm between the zombie's legs. Using its momentum against it, he flipped the creature over, driving its head straight into the floor with a sickening snap. Trevor pressed down with all his weight for a moment, ensuring the creature was incapacitated before rising to his feet. Meanwhile, Dominic stepped forward, swinging the blade horizontally across his body. However, he mistimed the blow, and the blade only slit the throat of the creature, failing to deter its assault. The zombie crashed into Dominic, driving him back several steps before he tripped, landing hard on his back. Within seconds, the creature was on top of him, thrashing about in a frenzied attempt to move in for a bite. Dominic struggled beneath its weight, desperately trying to fend off the relentless attack. With Dominic holding the creature up, Trevor swiftly retrieved the metal trash can and slammed it over the zombie's head. He applied pressure, hoping to pull the creature away from Dominic, but this only caused the neck wound to worsen, with flesh tearing and blood cascading down onto Dominic. "Dominic," Trevor called out in alarm. Reacting quickly, Dominic tossed the weapon up to Trevor, who caught it and positioned it flush against the creature's throat. With determination, Trevor pulled as hard as he could, slowly sawing through the undead flesh. Moments later, the head came clean off, plummeting into the trash can with a sickening thud. Trevor helped Dominic up from the ground, both of them visibly shaken. "Are you good?" Trevor inquired, concern etched in his voice. "Yeah, I'm good. Are you?" Dominic responded, his breaths coming in ragged gasps. "I think so," Trevor replied, his gaze fixed on the decapitated zombie. "What in the hell was that?" Dominic questioned, his voice trembling with disbelief. Before Trevor could respond, they noticed sounds emanating from the trash can, no vocalizations, just the eerie sound of teeth clamping together, as if the creature was still attempting to bite. They exchanged a worried glance, hoping it was merely a death spasm, but the noise persisted for several seconds. "What in the hell is going on?" Trevor muttered, his voice filled with dread. Chapter 2. Trevor and Conrad stood frozen in the aftermath of the violent confrontation, their bodies still trembling as they struggled to make sense of what had just occurred. Surveying the scene before them, strewn with fallen figures, their colleagues rushed over from the conference room. "Guys, are you okay?" Sasha's voice cut through the tension. Yeah, Sasha, we're all right. But they aren't, Trevor replied solemnly. What the hell were they doing? Who are they? Conrad's voice echoed his confusion. Examining the fallen individuals, they noticed the formal attire and the gruesome bite marks adorning some of them. Meanwhile, Ashlyn approached Bruce, her shock evident as she assessed his lifeless form. Despite her distress, she knelt beside him, attempting to detect a pulse to no avail. Guys, I don't think Bruce has a pulse. Ashlyn's words hung in the air, largely ignored by the others engrossed in examining the fallen figures. As they continued their scrutiny, Trevor suddenly had a realization upon seeing the first creature he had dispatched, a woman. Oh wait, I know her, Trevor exclaimed. What's her name? Conrad inquired. The hell if I know. But she's always on the stair climber every day at 4 at the gym on 22, Trevor recalled. Dominic approached, his expression conflicted, but he ultimately shook his head. No, it's not, he stated firmly. Dude, it is. Trust me, Trevor insisted. No, it's not. Dominic reiterated, his tone adamant. Undeterred, Trevor kicked the body over, positioning it face down. Dominic cast a peculiar glance at the corpse before reluctantly agreeing. Okay, yeah, it is her, he admitted. Sasha's incredulous voice cut through the tense atmosphere. Are you two kidding me? You just bashed her head in with a trash can and you're checking out her ass? She exclaimed, her disbelief evident. What? It wasn't for pleasure, it was for identification purposes, Dominic retorted defensively. Sasha shook her head in exasperation as she joined Conrad, who stood fixated on the gruesome sight before him. A heavy silence enveloped the group, broken only by the incessant clacking of teeth from within. I'm not a doctor, but that doesn't seem right, Conrad remarked, his tone laced with unease. Guys, we need to get Bruce an ambulance, Ashlyn interjected urgently. I thought you said he didn't have a pulse? Trevor questioned, puzzled. Which is why we need to get him an ambulance, Ashlyn emphasized. Before anyone could react, Ashlyn let out a piercing scream as Bruce began to stir. She scrambled to her feet, seeking refuge behind the others. Reacting swiftly, Trevor and Dominic positioned themselves in front of the group, with Dominic brandishing his blade, poised for action. They watched in dread as Bruce rose to his feet, momentarily disoriented. Bruce, are you okay? Ashlyn's voice trembled with concern. Bruce turned towards them with an unsettling excitement, emitting a guttural moan before lunging toward the group. Hold him up, Dominic commanded. Without hesitation, Trevor dropped to one knee, arms outstretched, gripping Bruce's suit to restrain him. Dominic wasted no time, delivering a decisive blow with his blade, the sickening sound of impact echoing as Bruce collapsed lifelessly. Tenderly, Trevor lowered him to the ground, showing a modicum of respect. The group stood in stunned silence, grappling with the gravity of what they had just witnessed. What do we do? Sasha's voice broke the silence. We need to make calls. Reach out to anyone we know in town. Find out what's happening, Dominic asserted. I think there's a TV in the corner office. I'll get it on and see if there's any news, Trevor offered. I'll grab the radio from the break room, Ashlyn volunteered. Should we call the police? Conrad interjected. You're welcome to, but remember, we were defending ourselves, Dominic said. Trust me, I didn't see shit. For all I know, Bruce went crazy, killed a few people before slamming that thing into his head, Conrad replied with a sly grin. I like your style, Conrad. Dominic chuckled darkly. You don't survive this long in this business without knowing how to pin things on people who can't defend themselves, Conrad retorted. Dominic acknowledged with a nod as the group dispersed, each member frantically dialing contacts on their phones. Minutes passed with no success. The damn lines keep dropping the call, Sasha exclaimed in frustration. I keep getting the all circuits are busy nonsense, Conrad added, equally frustrated. Keep trying. Somebody has to be out there, Dominic encouraged, his tone determined. They persisted for another agonizing minute, but the outcome remained unchanged. The cell system is messed up, Conrad declared with a grimace. What about the landlines? Sasha suggested, looking around. Who do you know that has a landline? Dominic retorted, raising an eyebrow. Sasha shot him a pointed glare before striding over to a nearby cubicle and picking up a landline phone. Everybody in this building for one, she remarked, a hint of triumph in her voice. Dominic smirked, acknowledging her resourcefulness. Good one. Now, who do we know in the building who might still be here? Dominic inquired. Oh, Chuck? Charlie? You know that guy from 12 who came up here last week for that presentation? Sasha recalled uncertainly. Dominic's eyes sparkled with hope as he dashed over to a nearby cubicle, rifling through papers until he unearthed a business card. His name was Calvin, Dominic announced triumphantly. Sasha shrugged nonchalantly, extending her hand for the card. What? I knew it started with a C. I was close, she quipped with a grin. Dominic shook his head in amusement as Sasha took the card and dialed the extension. He gestured for her to put it on speakerphone, and she complied. After a tense moment, the phone finally rang, and a voice answered, filled with fear and urgency. Hello? Hello? The man's voice trembled. Hey, is this Calvin? Dominic inquired. Yes, please help me, Calvin responded, his voice desperate. We'll do what we can, buddy. What's going on down there? Dominic pressed. Oh, please, God, help me, Calvin pleaded, the fear evident in his voice. They could hear faint screams in the background over the line. Calvin, I need you to focus for me, buddy. What's happening down there? Dominic urged. People are going crazy. They killed Carol. Just killed her. Calvin's voice quivered with horror. The trio exchanged concerned glances as Calvin's distress continued. Well, that's not ideal, Sasha remarked, stating the obvious. Please, you have to help me there. Calvin's plea was cut short by a loud crash on his end of the line. Excited screeches and moans could be heard, muffled by the glass. Calvin, you still with me, buddy? Dominic said loudly. Calvin's voice came through in barely audible whispers, prompting the group to strain to make out his words. I think he's praying, Sasha suggested. Come on, buddy. There's no God in this building. You need to tell me what's going on, Dominic urged, his tone firm. Another crash echoed through the line, accompanied by intensified screeching and moaning. Calvin's panic was palpable as he let out a frightened scream. The scream dissolved into pained yelps, merging with a cacophony of other sounds, moans, screeches, furniture being thrown about. Hey Calvin, you still with us, buddy? Dominic pressed, his voice tinged with concern. A long pause followed, filled only with the audible horror from Calvin's end. Buddy, you with us? Dominic's voice was heavy with resignation. With a sigh, Dominic motioned for Sasha to hang up the phone, which she did obediently. Well, I think it's safe to say that whatever is happening everywhere in the building, Dominic concluded grimly. Guys, I think you need to see this, Trevor said from the corner office, his call drawing everyone's attention as they gathered in the office he had singled out. Ashlyn was already present, her focus fixed on the television screen, while a radio sat beside her, forgotten. What are they saying on the news? Conrad inquired. I have no clue. I tried every channel I could think of, both local and national. The local channels are all gone, and the national ones are running pre-recorded content, Trevor explained, frustration evident in his tone. What do you mean the local channels are gone? Sasha pressed. I mean they're gone. They're still broadcasting, but it's just an empty studio, Trevor clarified, picking up the remote to demonstrate. With a click, he changed the channel to one of the local stations, revealing an eerie scene, an unmanned studio, devoid of any human presence. Switching to another station only confirmed the unsettling pattern. As they stared at the static images on the screen, a sudden movement caught their attention, startling them. It was accompanied by the sound of distant banging, adding to the unease in the room. Jesus, this is happening everywhere. At least in New York, Conrad muttered, his voice filled with disbelief. We don't know that, Conrad, Sasha interjected. Actually, we do, Trevor interjected, his voice grim. Trevor took charge once more, using the remote to switch to a specific channel. The television screen flickered before revealing a shocking sight that elicited gasps from everyone present. This is one of those live cam stations they have for tourists. This is Times Square right now, Trevor explained, his voice strained with disbelief. The scene displayed on the screen was one of utter chaos. From the vantage point several stories up, the entirety of the main intersection of Times Square was visible. People ran in every direction, the streets stained with blood. Hundreds of grotesque figures attempted to breach the stores lining the street, with some doors already giving way, allowing the frenzied mob inside for their gruesome feast. Turn it off, Sasha pleaded, unable to bear the horrific spectacle any longer. We might be able to learn, Conrad countered. Learn what, Conrad? That the world has gone crazy? That people are out there eating folks? What are we supposed to learn from that? Sasha retorted, her voice trembling with emotion. Conrad nodded in resignation before turning to Trevor, who promptly switched off the television. Ashlyn, were you able to get anything on the radio? Dominic inquired, turning to her for information. No, it's the same story with every channel, Ashlyn responded with a shake of her head. As she finished speaking, the radio beside her suddenly blared with the emergency broadcast signal. Maybe I spoke too soon, Ashlyn remarked. It took a moment for the radio broadcast to come to life, but when it did, a burly voice spoke urgently on the other end. Hello? Hey, this is on. Okay, if you can hear my voice, you need to keep your asses inside. We don't have a clue as to what's going on, only that if you go outside, there's a good chance you're going to die. So stay where you are. We'll tell you more when we know more. The broadcast abruptly ended, leaving the group unsettled. That was less than encouraging, Trevor remarked, voicing the collective unease. Before they could discuss it further, the sound of the elevator doors chiming interrupted them. Both Trevor and Dominic sprang into action, assuming defensive positions. Everybody stay in here. We'll handle this, Dominic instructed firmly. Arming themselves with weapons at hand, Dominic with his blade and Trevor with a heavy glass of ward, they dashed towards the main room, preparing for the doors to open. If there's too many of them, make a run for the conference room, Dominic advised. As they braced themselves for action, their tension eased slightly when the elevator doors slid open, revealing a man in a tool belt vigorously bashing a zombie's head with a hammer, punctuating each blow with an impressive string of curse words. Dustin? Trevor exclaimed in disbelief. Dustin, the middle-aged maintenance man, turned abruptly, his eyes wild with frenzy as he raised the hammer, poised to strike. His aggressive stance faltered upon spotting the two office workers. You know this guy? Dominic queried, eyeing Dustin warily. Yeah, he's the maintenance guy. He spent a week in my office last month fixing a leak, Trevor explained. Trevor? Is that you? Dustin's voice held a mix of relief and exhaustion. Yeah, it's me, Dustin. Are you okay? Trevor inquired, concern evident in his voice. Oh, just living the dream over here. This asshole took a bite out of my arm like I was a goddamned club sandwich, Dustin replied bitterly, gesturing towards the dead creature on the ground with his hammer. Well, look at you now, he exclaimed, his voice filled with a mix of anger and triumph as he delivered a final blow to the lifeless corpse. Dustin delivered a swift kick to the dead creature as he stepped out of the elevator. Before the doors could close, Trevor rushed over, grabbing the body and pulling it into the threshold, preventing the doors from shutting. "What the hell are you doing?" Dustin questioned, his brows furrowed in confusion. "The last elevator that came up had 3 of those things in it. Took out our intern. I don't know about you guys, but I'd really prefer to not have any more visitors to our floor," Trevor explained, his tone urgent. "Well, as long as we keep this one stuck here, none of the others will come up," Dustin said. "Are you sure?" Dominic asked skeptically. "Hell yeah, I'm sure. Rigged it up that way myself. Last year, some assholes down on 17 kept hogging the car to move into their office, but their people kept calling the others out. I put a stop to that real quick," Dustin confirmed proudly. "I'll get a few more things to put in the door, just to be sure," Trevor offered. Dustin stepped away from the door to give Trevor space. As he did, Dominic approached, his gaze fixed on his arm. "We need to tend to that bite. And I have some bad news to tell you," Dominic stated solemnly. Chapter 3. Dustin sat perched on a desk within the confines of a cubicle, observing Conrad as he bound his arm with a discarded shirt and packing tape. "You gotta be shitting me," Dustin exclaimed, eyeing Conrad skeptically. "You think I'm going to become one of those things?" "I'm just telling you what we saw," Dominic said. "It didn't happen until Bruce died," Ashlyn interjected. "Who the hell is Bruce?" Dustin inquired, perplexed. "The intern," Ashlyn clarified, prompting Dustin to exchange a knowing glance with Conrad. "You still not naming those suckers?" Dustin quipped, his lips curling into a smirk. "I'll be cold in the ground before I call an intern by their name in the first year," Conrad retorted defiantly. "Yeah, well, be careful what you promise," Dustin cautioned, gesturing towards the building's exterior and the chaos outside, eliciting a nod of agreement from Conrad. "So what do we do with him?" Ashlyn queried, casting a glance in Dustin's direction. "What the hell do you mean, what do you do with me?" Dustin retorted, his tone incredulous. "You don't do anything to me unless I keel over." "He's right. We don't know if that bite is going to kill him," Trevor chimed in, voicing his uncertainty. "And besides, we could use the help," Conrad added pragmatically. "Okay, but we're keeping a close eye on you," Dominic asserted firmly, "and if you take a nap, we're locking you in an office. We can't run the risk of you dying in your sleep and chasing us around in here." Dustin retorted in a mocking tone, "Oh no, you're going to lock me in a luxury office with a couch to sleep on. Whatever will I do?" "At least he's handling it well," Trevor remarked, acknowledging Dustin's sarcasm. "So what do we do now?" Sasha inquired. "We need to find every bit of food that we can," Dominic declared, his tone decisive. "There's a faucet in the break room, so grab every container you find and fill it with water. If things are falling apart outside, it's only a matter of time before stuff starts going down." "Let's start looking," Trevor suggested, prompting everyone to disperse, scouring desks and offices for anything edible. They worked diligently for about 15 minutes, gathering supplies and transporting them to the break room. Trevor entered the break room carrying a box of snack cakes, tossing it onto the table beside a small assortment of provisions. Among them, a full bag of chips stood out, though most of the items were sparse, non-nutritional fare. Meanwhile, Ashlyn was occupied at the sink, filling every available water bottle she could find, while Sasha rummaged through the cabinets, retrieving large bowls and setting them on the counter. "Do you think these will work?" Sasha asked. Trevor cautiously picked up one of the bowls, giving it a tentative sniff before recoiling in disgust, a faint gag escaping him before he composed himself. "I don't know what was in there, but I'm not drinking anything from there. I don't care how thirsty I get," he declared firmly, his expression reflecting his aversion. "Maybe we can use it for the bathroom. Rinse our hands off," Ashlyn suggested, nodding as she set the bowl aside and resumed her search, finding nothing else of value. Shortly after, Dominic, Conrad, and Dustin entered the room, each carrying a few items. Among the snacks, Dustin proudly displayed a couple of bottles of whiskey. "I'm not sure what you people did up here, but your bosses certainly liked the bottle," Dustin remarked with a hint of amusement. "In the most basic terms, we dealt with business-to-business financial services," Conrad explained matter-of-factly. "Yeah, I still have no idea what in the hell that is. But it must have paid well because one of these bottles is more than my weekly paycheck," Dustin quipped, his tone laced with sarcasm. "Well, set it aside for now. We still have work to do." "The FAR offices still need to be checked," Dominic interjected. "Come on, Dustin, let's go check them out," Conrad urged, leading the way as they left the room. Left behind, the younger members of the group surveyed the meager bounty with disappointment evident on their faces. "This isn't going to get us very far," Dominic remarked, his tone reflecting a sense of resignation. Dominic shook his head in frustration, tossing a box of snack cakes back onto the table. "We have to figure something out," he asserted, his voice tinged with urgency. "This will get us through a couple of days." "It wouldn't hurt to sit tight and see what happens," Trevor suggested optimistically. "Yeah, I'm with Trevor. This could all be over tomorrow," Sasha chimed in, echoing Trevor's sentiment. Dominic scoffed incredulously. "Are you kidding? Did you watch the same Times Square video that I did? Because that isn't getting cleaned up in a day." "You don't know. They could send in the military. The sun could come up tomorrow and the streets would be clear," Sasha countered, holding on to hope. "Or the sun comes up tomorrow and those things own the city. We have to plan for the worst," Dominic argued. Before their discussion could continue, Dustin and Conrad's panicked screams pierced the air, causing Dominic and Trevor to spring into action. They grabbed makeshift weapons and bolted out of the break room, scanning their surroundings for the source of the commotion. "Shut this door and lock it," Dominic ordered, his voice urgent. Sasha nodded, swiftly slamming the break room door shut and securing it with a lock, trapping herself and Ashlyn inside. Meanwhile, Dominic and Trevor hurried toward the emergency stairwell door, where they spotted the others. "The stairs," Trevor exclaimed. They sprinted through the labyrinth of cubicles, desperation driving their every step as they neared the door. As they approached, the horrifying scene unfolded before them. Conrad strained to keep the door shut, his grip white-knuckled on the release bar, while Dustin stood closely behind him, wielding a hammer in one hand and grasping the bar with the other. Trapped between the door and the frame was another worker, a young man, his body drenched in blood as he fought to free himself. His hands clutched desperately at the door and the frame, but he was losing ground. Behind him, several creatures feasted on his flesh, dragging him backward as he screamed in agony, his pleas for help drowned out by his pain. Dominic and Trevor rushed to assist, joining the others in their futile struggle to shut the door. "When I tell you to, I want you to let go of the door," Dominic commanded. "Are you out of your mind?" Conrad protested, but he ultimately acquiesced, nodding in agreement as Trevor and Dustin stepped back. As they retreated, Dominic discarded his blade, motioning for Dustin to pass him the hammer, which he did without hesitation. "On 3. 1, 2, 3. Dominic shouted. Conrad and Dominic released the door simultaneously, and it swung open with unexpected force. The young man, caught off guard, lost his footing and tumbled to the ground, vulnerable to the creature's onslaught. With horrifying speed, the ravenous creatures descended upon him, tearing into his flesh as he cried out in agony. Meanwhile, 2 zombies lunged for the open doorway, driven by their insatiable hunger. Reacting swiftly, Dominic stepped forward, brandishing his hammer with determined force. He swung hard, connecting with one ghoul's forehead, shattering its skull and sending it crashing to the ground. But the other zombie surged forward, ignoring the fate of its companion. It lunged at Dominic, who managed to raise his arm just in time to deflect its grasp. With a fierce swing of his hammer, he struck the creature squarely in the side of the head, but it remained undeterred. Forced to act quickly, he swung again, unleashing a brutal blow in an attempt to incapacitate the relentless foe. With the creature he had struck now limp, Dominic pushed it back, sending it crashing into its companions. As he retreated through the door, the echoes of screams reverberated through the stairwell. Once safely through the door, Dominic seized it and pulled it shut, the sound of the latch clicking into place, bringing a moment of relief. But it was short-lived as the banging of desperate creatures against the door began almost immediately. Refusing to relinquish his hold on the release bar, Dominic braced himself, prepared to defend against any attempt to breach the door. However, after several tense moments, he realized that the creatures weren't attempting to enter through the handle's release mechanism, but were instead simply trying to force their way through by sheer strength. Cautiously, Dominic loosened his grip on the bar while keeping the hammer at the ready. He breathed a sigh of relief when the creatures continued their futile attempts to break through the door, sparing him from a more immediate threat. Trevor's voice was edged with concern as he stared at the door. Why aren't they trying to get in? Dominic shrugged. It doesn't look like they're smart enough to use the door. Trevor nodded thoughtfully. I'm okay with that. A grin spread across Dominic's face as he gave Trevor a playful smack on the chest, the tension momentarily broken. Even so, I'd feel a lot better if we found a way to hold that shut. Conrad interjected. Dustin shook his head, his tone resigned. Those emergency doors don't lock. Well, surely there has to be a way to secure it, Dominic replied. Trevor's eyes brightened with sudden inspiration. I got an idea. Give me a second. With a purposeful stride, Trevor dashed towards the outer edge of the floor. Nestled between a couple of offices, he found a maintenance closet and flung it open, retrieving an industrial vacuum. With swift movements, he unwound the long power cable, extracting it from the base. Returning to the door, Trevor wrapped the cable around the release bar before making his way to a nearby cubicle. With deft hands, he pushed aside the lightweight cubicle wall and secured the power cable to the base of a heavy metal desk. He checked the tension, ensuring it was tight and secure, before giving it a couple of firm tugs in both directions. Satisfied, he nodded to himself, a sense of accomplishment settling over him. Trevor grinned with a hint of pride. It's not perfect, but somebody is going to have to put some effort in if they want to get that door open. Conrad's voice held genuine appreciation. Good work, Trevor. Dominic nodded in agreement. Yeah, not bad. He then raised his voice. Sasha, Ashlyn, we're good out here. Responding to Dominic's call, Sasha and Ashlyn emerged from the break room, their demeanor a mix of tension and composure. They approached the group, inspecting the makeshift lock. Well, that's something, Sasha remarked. I don't recommend taking the stairs. Dustin joked. What happened? Ashlyn inquired. Trevor raised a finger, directing their attention to the door. Amidst the pounding and moans, screams echoed from the stairwell. Both women sighed in resignation, shaking their heads. Still think this is going to get cleared up by the morning? Dominic asked the group. Sasha shot him a glare, her silence speaking volumes. Looks like we should get comfortable. Ashlyn replied. Conrad chimed in with a touch of humor. Well, if we're at the office, we're billing for it. Several of the others in the room let out half chuckles as they started to move away from the door, dispersing throughout the space. However, Dustin remained stationed by the door. What are you doing? Dominic asked. Dustin's expression was resolute. Locked or not, I'd feel a lot more comfortable if someone kept a watch on the door. We know the elevators aren't coming our way, so this is the only way in. Trevor nodded in agreement. He's not wrong. Okay, we'll go in 2-hour shifts. I think one of the offices has some magazines or books if you want something to pass the time, Dominic said. Just grab me whatever has the hottest women in it, Dustin replied. Dominic chuckled and gave him a thumbs up before walking away. The group convened in the conference room, gazing out over the city. From 35 floors up, it was difficult to discern the chaos unfolding at street level, but they could see enough to understand the gravity of the situation. Figures darted around, and the cars visible were either wrecked or plowing through pedestrians. Dominic addressed the group, his tone calm but serious. Okay, everybody, let's get comfortable. Chapter 4. The next day arrived, the clock ticking past 10:13 a.m. Sasha found herself sprawled across the couch in the corner office, her body occupying its entire length. Despite her best efforts, sleep had eluded her the previous night. Her bloodshot eyes remained fixed on the television screen, where the live feed from Times Square filled her with a deep sense of dread. Just a day prior, they had witnessed a mere few hundred creatures roaming the streets, their frantic attempts to breach the stores in search of survivors. But now, the situation had escalated drastically. The screen was filled with a horde of zombies, so numerous that Sasha struggled to even catch a glimpse of the pavement below. Most of the stores, once barricaded against the undead, now stood wide open, allowing the creatures to come and go as they pleased. Despite her inner turmoil, Sasha fought back the urge to shed a tear for those trapped inside the now vulnerable stores. She was acutely aware that allowing herself to feel sorry for the trapped individuals would only lead her to dwell on her own perilous situation, which, in some aspects, seemed even bleaker. While those unfortunate souls likely had only a few precious hours to contemplate their impending doom before being overwhelmed, Sasha felt the weight of infinite time pressing down on her. Despite the mental torture of witnessing the unfolding tragedy on the live feed, Sasha couldn't tear her gaze away. Meanwhile, Ashlyn occupied the corner of the room, her attention fixed on the world outside through a pair of binoculars she had discovered in one of the office desk drawers. For hours, Ashlyn had surveyed the neighboring office buildings, each one bearing witness to the same grim fate as their own. Scenes of gruesome violence, blood staining the windows, and, in one particularly haunting instance, a shattered window where someone had chosen a less painful exit from the world. Yet, amid the chaos, her focus remained on a solitary window in the building directly opposite theirs, just a few floors down. There, she had spotted another survivor. Unlike her relatively spacious surroundings with a full floor to move about, the man across the street was confined to a cramped office space. Ashlyn observed as the sunlight intermittently revealed the grim reality outside his window. Creatures pressed against the glass, their hunger apparent even from a distance. As she continued to watch, the man grabbed a whiteboard and began writing on it. When he turned it around, Sasha could make out the words 1977. She couldn't help but smirk, countering with 1973 before holding it up for him to see. "I'm starting to think you lied about being a die-hard Knicks fan," Ashlyn remarked, her tone light. Sasha's attention snapped back to her friend. "What did you say?" she demanded. Realizing her slip, Ashlyn quickly deflected. "Oh, nothing, Sasha. Just playing a trivia game with my new office buddy across the street." But Sasha wasn't in the mood for games. "The world is ending and you're playing trivia games?" she exclaimed incredulously. Ashlyn defended her actions, explaining, "I'm just trying to help keep his mind off things. As bad off as we are, he's a lot worse off." Frustration and fear boiled over in Sasha's response. "We're all screwed, Ashlyn," she retorted. "He's not any worse off than we are, because this isn't going to end well for any of us." Sasha's emotions briefly flared before subsiding, and as she regained her composure, Dominic and Trevor entered the room, drawn by the sound of raised voices. "Is everything okay in here?" Dominic inquired. Sasha rose from the couch, brushing past them to make her way to the bathroom. "Yeah, I'm fine," she assured them tersely. Both men raised their hands in a placating gesture, allowing her to pass. Once she was out of sight, they turned their attention to Ashlyn, who was engrossed in writing another question on the whiteboard. "What are you doing?" Trevor asked. "I made a friend," Ashlyn replied, nodding towards the window across the street. She extended the binoculars to Trevor, urging him to take a look. Straight across, about 4 or 5 floors down. Trevor peered through the binoculars, taking in the scene and the predicament of the man trapped in the neighboring office. He couldn't help but release a weary sigh. Poor bastard. Ashlyn held up the whiteboard, displaying the question for Trevor's benefit before setting it aside to join the others. "Have you spotted anybody else?" Trevor inquired. Ashlyn shook her head. "Nobody else that was alive." Trevor returned the binoculars to Ashlyn before making his way over to the television. They both glanced at the grim scene unfolding in Times Square, shaking their heads in disbelief before Trevor reached over and switched off the TV. What if the news comes on? Trevor voiced his concern. Look at that man. Do you really think the news is coming back on? Dominic countered, gesturing towards the chaos on the screen. After a moment's contemplation, Trevor grabbed the remote and turned the TV back on, prompting Dominic's questioning gaze. What are you doing? Dominic asked. Just being thorough, man. Chalk it up to OCD or whatever. Trevor replied casually. Dominic sighed in resignation. Yeah, all right. Just don't waste too much time because we have some hard choices to make. Come to the break room when you're done. With Dominic's departure, Trevor began flipping through the channels. Most of them were static or showed pre-programmed shows. Despite his initial excitement at hearing noise, each channel only offered disappointment. Frustrated, he switched off the television with a huff. We must be in hell, Trevor muttered bitterly. Death around every corner, and the only shows that are still coming in are things you couldn't have gotten me to watch if there was a gun to my head. It could be worse, Ashlyn remarked calmly. How? Trevor questioned. You could be stuck alone in an office with your only escape being whatever trivia questions I can come up with, Ashlyn quipped. Trevor couldn't help but chuckle in agreement. Fair point. Ashlyn quickly scribbled a brief message to her friend across the street, informing him of her imminent return. Through the binoculars, she saw him respond with a thumbs up. So what does Dominic want to meet about? Ashlyn asked Trevor as they made their way out of the office. I don't know, but whatever it is, it can't be good, Trevor replied somberly. Exiting the office, they encountered Sasha emerging from the bathroom. It was evident that she had been crying, but she composed herself before addressing them. I'm fine, you don't have to come check on me, Sasha insisted. Okay, Sasha, you're good. We're headed to the break room. Dominic called a meeting, Ashlyn reassured her. With a nod, Sasha gathered her resolve and followed them into the break room. Everyone was present, with Dustin stationed just outside the door to keep watch over the stairwell. Despite the makeshift lock holding up and the overnight commotion subsiding, he remained vigilant. As they entered, Dominic distributed bottles of water to each of them. Okay, we're all here. What's going on, Dominic? Trevor inquired. I think we're all in agreement that we're on our own, Dominic began, setting the tone for the discussion. As Dominic spoke, everyone nodded in agreement, acknowledging their shared predicament. Okay, good, glad that we're on the same page, Dominic continued. Now, I think we can also agree that our food situation leaves a lot to be desired. He gestured toward the table, which held only a fraction of the food they had yesterday. The collective rumbling of their empty stomachs underscored the urgency of their situation. The meager provisions they had were far from nutritious. What little we have left is nothing but empty calories, Dominic remarked grimly. We're almost going to feel worse after eating it than if we just starved. Conrad voiced the question on everyone's mind. So what do we do? Clearly, we need food, Trevor stated. But where? Conrad pressed. The cafeteria is all the way down on 20. There ain't no way in hell we're making that run. Even though those things aren't banging on our door, I can still hear them in the stairwell, Dustin said. How many do you think are in there? Ashlyn inquired. Easily dozens, Dustin replied. It's hard to tell with the echoing, but there's a whole mess of those things. We gotta try something, Trevor said. Dustin's response was grim. Well, if you try to go to 20, the only food is going to be you. Trevor pondered Dominic's suggestion for a moment before nodding in agreement. I agree with Dustin. Getting down to 20 isn't realistic with the weapons we have now, but we don't have to go that far. We just have to get to 32, Dominic proposed. The group exchanged curious glances as Dominic produced a bright yellow piece of paper, unfolding it and laying it out on the table for all to see. As everyone gathered around to read it, they found a childish clip art picture of a clown holding balloons, accompanied by the words "Happy Birthday." Below, a handwritten note invited them to join Carla's 30th birthday celebration in the break room on the 32nd floor, promising lunch. Dominic pointed to the date on the invitation, which indicated that the celebration had taken place the day before the apocalypse began. "Do you think there's much food there?" Conrad questioned. "Oh, there's gotta be," Dustin chimed in confidently. "That floor always threw the best shindigs for their people. And quite frankly, not too many people liked Carla, so there were probably a fair amount of leftovers. And the power is still on too, which means whatever they put in the refrigerator is still good," Dominic added. "It's dangerous," Sasha said. "No more dangerous than just sitting here and starving to death," Dominic countered. "The question is, who is going?" Dustin interjected. Conrad hesitated. "Well, I'm out. With as out of shape as I am, if I walked down 3 flights of stairs, I'd have a heart attack." "Yeah, you sit here, you pansy." "I'll go," Dustin offered bravado. Dominic shook his head. "No, it has to be Trevor and me." "Fuck you, rich boy. I'm just as good as any of you," Dustin retorted defiantly. "Swing your arm," Dominic challenged, his tone firm. Dustin grabbed a hammer from his belt and swung it with his good arm, shaking his head in disagreement. "Now do your other one," Dominic instructed. Dustin sighed, reluctantly switching hands before attempting to swing. He struggled to lift the hammer to head level before dropping it due to the pain. "That's what I thought," Dominic remarked. Ashlyn approached Dustin, motioning for his arm. Initially resistant, he eventually relented and allowed her to inspect it. "I just want to check it," Ashlyn explained softly. As she unwrapped the bandage, the group winced at the sight. The bite showed no signs of healing and was surrounded by black marks. "Oh God. I think it's infected," Ashlyn exclaimed in horror. "Or it's just the infection," Dominic countered stoically. Despite the worsening condition of his wound, Dustin remained defiant. "Yeah, well, if you're going to make it down there, you're going to need my help," Dustin asserted. "How do you figure?" Trevor inquired. "There are 10 more floors above us, boy. And I've heard those things up and down the stairs. When you bust out of here, they're going to chase your ass. I can stay on the landing, hold them off, buy you some time," Dustin explained determinedly. Trevor and Dominic exchanged a knowing look, silently affirming their decision, before Dominic addressed Dustin. "Okay, if you're sure," Dominic conceded. "Hell yeah, I'm sure," Dustin replied. Ashlyn voiced her concern. "You could get overrun if you do." Dustin shrugged off the risk. "Yeah, but it gives me the chance to prove some of these rich assholes wrong. I can die a happy man with that." He glanced over at Dominic, sharing a moment of camaraderie with a chuckle and a wink. Dominic and Trevor nodded in appreciation, allowing Dustin his moment of resolve. "Okay, we have a plan. I want you all to figure out who is on door duty and how you're handling that," Dominic instructed, shifting the focus back to the task at hand. "Hey, Dustin, do you mind if I borrow a couple of screwdrivers?" Trevor asked. Dustin readily produced a few screwdrivers, offering them to Trevor with a smile. "They've served me well over the years. Hope they treat you just as good." Trevor accepted the tools with gratitude, nodding his thanks as he inspected them. "Okay, let's get in position and get this over with," Dominic declared with as much confidence as he could muster. Despite his lingering doubts about the plan, he knew they had no other choice but to press forward. Chapter 5. Dominic, Trevor, and Dustin stood poised by the stairwell door, their weapons at the ready as Sasha unraveled the power cable from the desk, clearing the path for them. Dominic tightly clutched the bloodied blade from the paper cutter, while Trevor held the weighty glass award, with screwdrivers stowed in his back pocket. Dustin loomed behind them, his grip firm on the hammer. "Okay, you ready to run?" Dominic's voice cut through the tense air. Yeah, 3 floors down and through the door, Trevor affirmed. If those things get close, we get through that door and slam it shut. I'll cover the floor while you secure it, Dominic said. Trevor nodded in agreement, shifting his focus to Dustin, who met their gazes with a determined yet grim expression. Are you good, Dustin? Dominic inquired. Yeah, you don't worry about me. You just get down there and get that food. I'll make sure nothing comes after you from above, Dustin assured them, his resolve unwavering. How are you guys getting back up here? Ashlyn interjected. We're going to have to fight our way back up. It might take us a little while though, so don't get worried, Dominic responded. Yeah, if those things are outside the door, we'll sit tight and wait for them to get distracted and move on, Trevor added. Conrad strode purposefully to a nearby cubicle, his hand reaching for the landline phone resting on the desk. With practiced efficiency, he punched in a sequence of numbers, setting off a sudden ring that jolted everyone in the vicinity. Is someone calling us? Sasha's voice carried a hint of excitement, her eyes scanning the room for the source of the ringing. Her anticipation quickly deflated as Conrad swiftly ended the call, bringing the ringing to an abrupt halt. No, that was me. I just wanted to check that the inner office system was still up and running, Conrad explained, his tone matter-of-fact. These things are hardwired into the building, so you should be able to call up here. So if there's anything we can do to help, he continued. We'll let you know. But that's some good thinking, Conrad, Dominic acknowledged, a note of appreciation in his voice. Let's get this moving before I lose my nerve, Trevor interjected. Dominic nodded in agreement, reaching for the door handle. Before he could proceed, Dustin tapped his shoulder, drawing his attention. As soon as we're through, you shut this up tight until you are certain it's clear. Even if you hear me screaming, Dustin instructed, his tone grave as he displayed his bitten arm. I already got one of these, so I don't think it's going to matter if I get a couple more, he added, a grim determination flickering in his eyes. The ladies and Conrad exchanged nods of understanding before refocusing on the task at hand. Dominic seized the handle and propelled them through the door, bursting into the stairwell with urgency. With a swift glance, Dominic assessed their immediate surroundings, confirming that the landing and the first set of descending stairs were clear. Without hesitation, he directed their movement in that direction, leading the way with determined strides. As their presence in the stairwell reverberated, the noise echoing off the walls, soon accompanied by haunting moans emanating from both above and below. Dominic and Trevor descended a flight of stairs before encountering their first adversary, a creature hurtling up towards them. Reacting swiftly, Dominic delivered a powerful kick to the creature, disrupting its ascent and sending it crashing back onto the landing below. The sickening sound of bones fracturing echoed in the confined space as the creature struggled to regain its footing. However, before it could recover, Trevor seized the opportunity, swinging the base of the glass award with precision, delivering a decisive blow to its head. The creature slumped to the ground, motionless, its threat extinguished for good. The duo pressed on, descending the flights of stairs with urgency, the distant sounds of approaching creatures serving as a relentless reminder of the danger lurking below. Meanwhile, Dustin stood his ground on the landing outside of the 35th floor, his hammer gripped tightly in anticipation. From above, several zombies descended, their grotesque forms moving with an unsettling purpose. As the first creature reached him, Dustin wasted no time, delivering a swift and forceful blow with his hammer, dispatching it with brutal efficiency. Yeah, come on, you assholes. I've got all you can handle right here. Dustin's voice rang out defiantly. Dustin braced himself for the impending onslaught as a trio of creatures descended upon him with relentless ferocity. With gritted teeth and determination etched across his face, he pulled his arm back, readying himself to strike as they closed in on him with alarming speed. Swinging with all his might, Dustin's hammer connected with the first zombie's head, but the blow glanced off its skull, failing to halt its momentum. In a swift and savage attack, the creature lunged forward, sinking its teeth deep into Dustin's shoulder, sending searing pain coursing through his body and causing him to involuntarily release his weapon. Before he could react, the other two creatures seized their opportunity, joining in the frenzied assault. Despite the overwhelming odds stacked against him, Dustin refused to succumb without a fight. With a defiant roar, he wrapped his arms around the three zombies, leveraging their combined weight against them. Using their own momentum against them, he allowed himself to be pushed backward, his determination to resist evident even in the face of impending doom. "If I'm going out, you assholes are coming with me." Dustin's voice echoed with defiance. Dustin found himself at the railing on the landing, the sturdy barrier providing a scant sense of security against the sheer drop into the empty space at the center of the stairwell. With the relentless creatures still bearing down on him, he made a split-second decision. Gripping onto them tightly, he propelled himself upward, leveraging their combined weight to propel them over the edge. In a chaotic blur of motion, the quartet tumbled through the air, hurtling towards the ground 35 stories below. The descent was far from smooth, limbs and heads colliding with the railings on their rapid descent, each impact adding to the cacophony of noise echoing through the stairwell. Dominic and Trevor, making their way down the stairs, were startled by the sudden commotion. "What the hell was that?" Dominic's voice rang out. Rushing to the railing, they peered over, catching sight of the four figures flailing in the dim light before disappearing from view in a sickening plunge. "I think that was Dustin," Trevor muttered, a heavy weight settling in his chest. "Damn. Come on, one more floor." Dominic's resolve hardened, his voice tinged with sorrow as they pressed forward. The two of them continued their descent, reaching the landing on the 32nd floor. While there were no zombies within immediate reach, the encroaching threat was palpable, their presence drawing ever closer with each passing moment. Taking a brief moment to steel themselves for what awaited them beyond the door, Dominic outlined their plan with a sense of urgency. "We get in and stay low until we figure out what's there," he stated firmly, his voice betraying no hint of hesitation. Trevor nodded in agreement as they flung open the door, swiftly darting inside and closing it as gently as possible behind them. However, the sight that greeted them within was grim and unsettling, blood staining the door and pooling ominously on the floor just ahead. Shaking off the unsettling sight, they remained low, moving quickly and quietly towards the nearest cubicle located directly across from the door, approximately 5 yards away. With their weapons firmly in hand, they sought refuge within the shadows, their senses heightened as they listened intently to the sounds of movement echoing throughout the floor. The room was shrouded in darkness, illuminated only by the faint glow of the night lights scattered sporadically throughout the space. In the dim light, only a handful of spots on the floor were visible, casting eerie shadows that seemed to dance and flicker in the darkness. A jolt of adrenaline shot through both Dominic and Trevor as the banging on the door intensified, the frenzied clamor of the zombies echoing through the space. With each passing second, the imminent threat grew closer, the sounds of shuffling footsteps and haunting moans drawing ever nearer. Suddenly, the door bore the brunt of the undead onslaught as several zombies crashed into it from both sides, their collective force preventing it from budging. Dominic, seizing the opportunity, cautiously peered over the cubicle wall, his eyes scanning the dimly lit surroundings in search of a plan. The layout of the floor mirrored their own, with rows of cubicles occupying the central area and offices lining the perimeter. It took him a moment to spot the break room, situated approximately 30 yards to their left on the other side of the elevator bank. However, his initial relief soured into frustration when he realized that the break room was less of a defined space and more of a makeshift arrangement, a freestanding wall with a refrigerator and tables arranged haphazardly around it. Curses escaped his lips under his breath as he processed the less than ideal situation they found themselves in. Sensing Dominic's discontent, Trevor cautiously joined him, peering over the cubicle wall to assess the situation. His heart sank as he spotted several creatures milling about near the break room, their attention seemingly unaffected by the chaos at the door. Dominic swiftly communicated his plan to Trevor through hand signals, indicating their intention to confront the creatures near the break room. Initially hesitant, Trevor shook his head in refusal, but Dominic remained resolute, gesturing towards the zombies by the stairwell door to emphasize the need to act while they were preoccupied. After a moment of silent deliberation, Trevor reluctantly nodded in agreement, understanding the urgency of their predicament. With Dominic taking the lead, they emerged from their cover, moving stealthily away from the door, their movements purposeful yet cautious. Staying low to the ground, they navigated through the rows of cubicles, reaching the first intersection and making a sharp turn towards the break room. Finally, they found themselves in position, approximately 20 yards away from their target, with 3 zombies within sight. With precision and swiftness, Dominic and Trevor sprang into action, their movements coordinated and efficient as they closed in on their unsuspecting target. Dominic led the charge, his blade slashing through the air with deadly accuracy as it connected with the zombie's neck, cleanly decapitating it in one swift motion. Trevor followed closely behind, catching the falling body and lowering it to the ground with practiced ease, ensuring minimal noise to avoid alerting the nearby creatures. To their astonishment, the other 2 zombies near the break room remained oblivious to the commotion, their attention undivided as Dominic and Trevor swiftly moved into position for their next strike. Dominic nodded to Trevor, a silent signal of understanding passing between them as they continued to exploit the cover of darkness to their advantage. Closing the distance with calculated stealth, Trevor struck first, delivering a powerful blow with the glass award weapon that sent the first creature crashing to the ground. Without hesitation, he followed up with a decisive kill shot, ensuring the threat was neutralized. Dominic wasted no time, rushing to confront the remaining zombie as it turned towards the source of the disturbance, its moans growing louder with each passing moment. With a fluid and precise motion, Dominic swung his blade, the sharp edge finding its mark as it sliced through the air, delivering a devastating blow to the side of the zombie's head. With a final groan, the creature collapsed to the ground, its threat extinguished in a swift and decisive manner. In the tense aftermath of their encounter, Dominic and Trevor braced themselves for the possibility of further zombie attacks, their senses on high alert as they awaited any signs of movement. Yet, to their surprise, the anticipated onslaught did not materialize. Exchanging a silent nod of acknowledgement, they cautiously proceeded to raid the refrigerator, Trevor's smile widening at the sight of the abundant supply of sandwiches neatly stacked within. With practiced efficiency, he motioned for Dominic to pass him the grocery bags, swiftly transferring the food into them. Meanwhile, Dominic scoured the cabinets, locating canned goods which he quickly added to their growing stash. As they busied themselves with the task of gathering supplies, a distant noise caught their attention. A creature from the far end of the floor had taken notice of their presence, its loud moan echoing through the space as it rushed towards them with alarming speed. Both men tensed, poised to defend themselves against the imminent threat, but their preparations were interrupted as the creature stumbled over a corpse lying in the aisle, its frenzied charge abruptly halted as it collided with a cubicle wall, creating a cacophony of noise in the process. As the sounds of the struggle reverberated through the floor, the banging at the stairwell door ceased, replaced by the ominous chorus of moans and running footsteps. To get to an office. Dominic's urgent command spurred both men into action as they hastily seized the gathered food and dashed towards an office located at the outer edge of the building. Glancing back, they saw the relentless horde of zombies hot on their heels, their undead moans echoing through the corridor. With a few precious steps ahead of their pursuers, Dominic and Trevor managed to reach the safety of the office, its large glass window providing a temporary barrier against the advancing threat. They slammed the door shut and secured it tightly, their hearts racing as they watched the zombies collide with the glass in futile attempts to reach them. Initially, only a handful of zombies pounded on the window, but soon it became apparent that some of the creatures from the stairwell had breached the floor. Before long, a dozen zombies were pressed against the glass, their hungry eyes fixed on the 2 men inside. Seated on the desk, Dominic and Trevor exchanged a sober glance, fully aware of the dire situation they found themselves in. "Well, that almost worked," Trevor remarked wryly, breaking the tense silence that hung in the air. Both men sat in silence for a moment before Dominic reached into one of the bags, retrieving a sandwich. He inspected it briefly before taking a bite, his words muffled by the food in his mouth. Not the biggest fan of tuna salad, but I'm sure as hell not going to turn it down at this point, he commented between bites. Trevor nodded in agreement, following suit and grabbing a sandwich for himself. As they ate, they cast occasional glances towards the zombies outside, their minds undoubtedly churning with thoughts of escape and survival. "So, any bright ideas?" Trevor inquired, breaking the silence once more. Dominic sighed, shaking his head as he chewed thoughtfully. "At the moment, I'm just going to enjoy eating. Those things aren't going anywhere, and sadly, neither are we." Chapter 6. Dominic and Trevor perched on the desk, savoring their sandwiches, their gazes fixed on the horde of zombies pressed against the office window. In the midst of their dire circumstances, they lapsed into silence, allowing the gravity of their situation to settle upon them. Eventually, as Trevor polished off his meal, he shattered the tense quiet. "Well, at least we're not going to starve to death," Trevor remarked. Dominic shook his head, addressing Trevor's defeatist attitude. "You see, this is your biggest problem. You give up too easily." Trevor's curiosity piqued. "You have an idea?" Dominic nodded, but instead of elaborating, he resumed eating his sandwich, leaving Trevor baffled by his sudden silence. "Well, what is it?" Trevor pressed, but Dominic merely raised a finger, signaling for silence as he savored the last bites of his meal. A mischievous grin played on his lips, further fueling Trevor's frustration. Finally, with his sandwich consumed, Dominic sprang to his feet. "Okay, come here. I got something to show you." Trevor trailed Dominic to the window, where they both stretched on tiptoes to peer over the mass of zombies outside. Dominic gestured toward a wall to their right, prompting Trevor to glance over and shake his head in confusion. "Okay, what in the world am I looking at?" Trevor asked. "The office near the center." "Look out the window," Dominic instructed. Trevor followed his gaze, eventually spotting the object of Dominic's focus. Outside the building, the window washer's rig sat idle. "You're out of your damn mind," Trevor remarked incredulously. "Maybe, but it's an idea that's going to work," Dominic replied confidently. "Even if we could get to it, we'd have to get through the windows, which isn't that easy," Trevor pointed out. "You still have your screwdrivers, right?" Dominic asked. "Yeah," Trevor confirmed. "Punch some holes through it, then start hammering away with the office chair. We should be able to get through," Dominic suggested. "Yeah, maybe, but how in the hell are we getting there? And why aren't we going for the stairs if we can get out of here so easily?" Trevor questioned, voicing his doubts. Dominic smirked before striding over to the desk and lifting the receiver of the phone. With purpose, he punched in a sequence of digits, then set the phone to speaker mode. After a few rings, a voice answered. "Boys, is that you?" Conrad's voice sounded with relief. "Live and in the flesh," Dominic replied. "Oh, thank God." "We were getting worried," Ashlyn chimed in. "When have we ever let you down, Ashlyn?" Dominic teased. "Where are you?" Sasha's voice held concern. "We're still on 32. We got into a bit of a pickle," Dominic explained. "Yeah, we got the food, but we're trapped," Trevor added. "Oh my God," Ashlyn gasped. "I don't know how much help we're going to be. Those things are all over the stairwell," Sasha admitted. "I'm sure you boys already know, but Dustin didn't make it," Conrad interjected. "Yeah, we saw him go down the stairwell," Trevor confirmed. "And if we're going to avoid his fate, we're going to need your help," Dominic stated gravely. "I told you, Dominic, the stairwell is filled with those things. There's no way for us to get up to you," Sasha replied, her voice tinged with frustration. "That's not what I need you to do, Sasha. In fact, you can help us out by sitting on your ass and dialing the phone," Dominic quipped. There was a brief pause as the group on the other end of the line pondered their next move. "Where are we calling?" Conrad inquired. "We're in office." "Hang on," Dominic responded, eyeing the phone for the extension number. "Okay, we're in office extension 3216. I assume it's the floor plus an extension. Try something in the 40s and let's see where that rings, Dominic suggested. Okay, Sasha is getting to another phone and dialing. Stay tuned, Conrad relayed. As Trevor shifted his attention back to the window, a phone began ringing at a nearby cubicle just outside the targeted office. A couple of zombies detached from the window and rushed toward the sound. The good news is, it works. The bad news is, the cubicle is right where we need to go, Trevor reported. Did you hear that, Conrad? Dominic inquired. Yeah, I heard it loud and clear. Give me a minute, Conrad replied, followed by some indistinct murmuring on the other end of the line. Okay, take two, Conrad announced after a moment. Another phone rang, this time at the far end of the room. The same zombies that had sprinted after the first call now hurried toward the new sound. Trevor turned around and gave a thumbs up. Okay, that one will work. Tell her to hang up, Dominic instructed. More murmurs ensued on the other end of the line before the phone fell silent. If it was working, then why are we hanging up? Conrad questioned. Because the crowd that's by our door still has us in sight. We're going to have to play peekaboo with them, Dominic explained. Trevor joined Dominic behind the desk, crouching low as they held onto the phone, keeping a watchful eye on their surroundings. Okay, I want you to give it 2 minutes before calling again. Hopefully, these things have goldfish memories, Dominic instructed. We can do that, but where are you going? We can't help with the stairwell, Conrad inquired. To the conference room side of the building. There's a window washer rig that we're going to borrow and come on up to you, Dominic revealed. That's a bold play. I like it, Conrad remarked. When have you ever known me to be subtle, Conrad? Dominic chuckled. We'll get that window open for you, Conrad assured. That would be appreciated, Dominic acknowledged. Dominic glanced at Trevor and received a thumbs up in response. Okay, Conrad, we're as ready as we're ever going to be. Dial it up, Dominic urged. Good luck, boys. We'll see you in a minute, Conrad wished them. A moment later, the phone at the other end of the floor began ringing. Trevor lowered himself to the floor, peering out from underneath the desk. He observed as most of the feet by the window scurried away towards the noise, but 2 pairs lingered. Damn it, we still have 2 sticking around, and they're right by the door, Trevor muttered. Both of them noticed that the door, despite being locked, was moving with every smack of the zombies outside. The lock bouncing around in its housing created enough noise to keep the creatures interested. We're going to have to fight our way out, Trevor concluded. Let me deal with them. As soon as we're out of this door, I want you running to that office, Dominic instructed. Trevor nodded as they both rose from the desk, staying low. They reached on top, grabbing the bags of food, 2 each, and secured them to their arms so that their hands were free. Let's do it, Dominic affirmed. Dominic approached the door, with Trevor close behind him. Dominic readied his blade, firmly planting himself on the floor before reaching for the lock. Remember, get to that office and start working on the window. I'll be right behind you, Dominic said, his voice resolute. Trevor nodded as Dominic unlocked the door. It immediately lurched towards them, but Dominic's foot, planted strategically a few inches away, halted its progress. With a push from Trevor, Dominic exerted the extra force needed to burst out of the room in a single, powerful motion. They generated enough momentum to send the 2 creatures at the door tumbling backward. One zombie managed to keep its footing, becoming Dominic's immediate target. He swung his blade, connecting with the side of its head and dropping it instantly. The other zombie, however, stumbled into a nearby cubicle, flailing wildly as it fell. Its arms sent objects crashing to the ground, including a computer monitor and a small filing cabinet, creating a cacophony of noise. Trevor sprinted towards the target office, his gaze darting towards the creatures that had been distracted by the ringing phone. A couple of them pivoted at the sound of the falling zombie, spotting Trevor and altering their trajectory. Ah hell, Trevor cursed, increasing his speed. They spotted us, he shouted as he raced onward. Dominic swiftly stepped into the cubicle with the fallen zombie, delivering a lethal blow with his weapon before it could regain its balance. As he withdrew the blade from the skull, he heard Trevor's warning. Glancing up, he saw the creatures homing in on their location, their intent unmistakable. Dominic broke away from the fallen ghoul, pushing his legs to their limit as he closed the distance towards the office, trailing about 15 yards behind Trevor. He observed as Trevor reached the office just before the creatures arrived. Inside, Trevor hastily grabbed the door, struggling to hold it closed as the zombies relentlessly attempted to force their way inside. His gaze remained fixed on Dominic, who was rapidly approaching the small mob of 4 just outside the office. Dominic lowered his shoulder and barreled into the creatures, sending them stumbling away from the door. Seizing the opportunity, Trevor released his grip, allowing Dominic to rush inside. However, as Dominic attempted to shut the door, one of the ghouls managed to wedge its arm and leg inside, blocking it from closing completely. Exerting all his strength, Dominic threw his weight behind the door, desperately trying to keep it shut. "Get the window open," he shouted to Trevor, urgency lacing his voice. Trevor resisted the urge to assist Dominic in holding the door shut, instead obeying orders and hastening to the window. He withdrew his 3 screwdrivers, tossing 2 onto the desk as he readied one. With determined focus, Trevor began thrusting the screwdriver at the window with all the force he could muster. Each impact punctured a small hole in the glass, causing it to splinter outward from the break. The window was made of high-grade safety glass, making it tough to penetrate. Persisting in his efforts, Trevor continued working on it for a couple of minutes, strategically spreading out his attacks to create several weak points. Glancing back at Dominic, he saw that the zombies outside had multiplied to 10 strong, and Dominic was gradually losing ground. "God, I hope this works," Trevor muttered under his breath. With a determined grip, Trevor hoisted the heavy office chair, swinging it with all his might. The first impact shattered a substantial portion of the weakened window. He continued to swing, each blow widening the hole until it was large enough for a person to pass through. With a final push, Trevor forced the remaining glass downward, clearing the way for their escape. "I'm through," Trevor called out. "Get outside and get those controls ready to move up," Dominic instructed urgently. Trevor nodded, swiftly maneuvering onto the window washer's rig. As he stepped out, he noticed dried blood stains on the railing, but there was no time to dwell on what had transpired. He hurried to the controls, familiarizing himself with their operation. Once he felt confident, he tapped on the window to signal his readiness. Dominic broke away from the door, sprinting towards the window with all his might, Trevor's hand hovering over the controls, poised to act as soon as Dominic reached safety. But before Dominic could take 2 steps, the zombies burst through the door, hot on his heels. "Hit it! Hit it! Hit it!" Dominic urged, desperation evident in his voice. As Trevor swiftly obeyed the order, he hit the lever to activate the window washer rig, initiating its slow ascent. It moved steadily upward, providing Dominic with a lifeline to escape through the window. However, it wasn't fast enough, allowing a few zombies to reach the window as well. The first creature lunged straight through the shattered glass, its momentum causing it to trip over the railing and tumble over the edge. Dominic narrowly evaded its grasping claws. The next zombie managed to maintain some semblance of control, adjusting its trajectory as it landed on the metal rig. It turned towards Dominic, who found himself trapped on the narrow platform with nowhere to retreat. The ghoul seized Dominic, pulling him closer with a vice-like grip. Before Dominic could push it away, another creature surged through the window with too much force. It collided with the zombie on the washing rig, sending them both hurtling over the edge in a chaotic tumble. As the zombie's relentless grip refused to release Dominic, he was pulled off balance, teetering on the edge of the platform. Trevor watched in horror as his friend was dragged over the precipice, his futile attempt to grab Dominic falling short as his fingers brushed against his shirt. With a heavy heart, Trevor snapped into survival mode, turning his attention back to the window. The next zombie crashed into the rig with a guttural thud, its arms reaching up in a futile attempt to climb aboard. only to have them caught and cut by the unforgiving pinch between the rig and the glass. Standing there, gazing down towards the street below, Trevor felt the weight of loss settle upon him as his friend vanished beneath a sea of ravenous creatures 32 floors below. Chapter 7. 2 days had passed, marked by the relentless pounding on the stairwell door, echoing through the corridors with a persistence that matched the unsettling ambience of those uncertain times. Trevor and Conrad found themselves seated at the worn break room table, engaging in what could be described as the most lackluster game of poker ever played. In a world where currency held little value, they substituted paper clips for chips just so that they had something to bet. Trevor amassed a towering stack of the makeshift tokens, while Conrad, with only 6 to his name, eyed his hand after the redraw. "Okay, I'm all in," Conrad declared, pushing his meager pile into the center. Trevor chuckled softly, acknowledging the bet before revealing his hand. "Full house, 10s over 6s, he announced, causing Conrad to sigh in resignation, his cards hitting the table face down. "Jesus, I can't even win paperclips," Conrad muttered in defeat. "Don't worry, if you want to continue your chain project, I'm happy to donate some to the cause," Trevor offered, his tone laced with faux sympathy. Conrad managed a sad chuckle, shaking his head in acknowledgement. Just then, Ashlyn entered the room. "Are you two still at it?" she inquired, her voice carrying a hint of concern. "It's not like we have much else to do," Trevor replied, his tone tinged with resignation. "Well, maybe instead of pissing the day away, you can help me get Sasha away from that television," Ashlyn suggested, her worry evident in her words. "Is she still watching Times Square?" Conrad asked, already anticipating the answer. "Yeah, staring straight at the screen like she's hypnotized. She doesn't look away or say anything, just staring with a defeated look on her face," Ashlyn explained. "Can you really blame her?" Conrad mused, his words carrying the weight of their collective despair. "It's not like we have a lot to be optimistic about." Ashlyn shook her head as she made her way to the refrigerator, her hand reaching for the handle. With a gentle tug, she pulled it open, revealing the last 2 sandwiches nestled inside. "Is this really it? This is all we have left?" Ashlyn's voice held a tinge of disbelief as she glanced over at Trevor. "Yeah, one is yours and the other is Sasha's," Trevor confirmed, his tone resigned. Conrad interjected with a poorly timed attempt at humor. "Then we're going to have to take a vote on who gets eaten first." His words hung in the air, met with incredulous stares from both Trevor and Ashlyn. He quickly backtracked, raising his hands in a gesture of apology. "I'm sorry, that didn't come out right." "He is partially right, though. We do need to have a vote on what to do," Trevor admitted, his expression somber. "I'm not really keen on sitting here and starving to death. That doesn't seem like a pleasant way to go." "And what would be a pleasant way to go?" Trevor, falling 35 floors to the pavement below. Ashlyn's retort was sharp, her emotions still raw from Dominic's death. "At least it's over quick." 10 seconds of free fall and bam, lights out, Trevor countered, his voice tinged with a grim acceptance. "Well, it's so good to know you have your plans so well thought out," Ashlyn replied, her voice trembling slightly. Trevor's demeanor softened as he addressed her. "I know you two were close, but I was doing exactly what Dominic told me to do. Believe me when I say I'm haunted by what I saw happen. If I somehow survive this, I'll never be able to unsee that image of him being pulled over." Ashlyn's composure wavered for a moment, tears threatening to spill, before she gathered herself. With a slight nod towards Trevor, she conveyed both apology and understanding. "When you two wrap up your game, come help me out with Sasha," Ashlyn requested before exiting the room. "We'll be in there in just a minute," Conrad assured her, his attention shifting back to Trevor. "So Trevor, what are we going to do?" Conrad inquired, his tone tinged with uncertainty. "Why are you asking me?" "I thought you were the boss," Trevor replied, a hint of frustration in his voice. "The only reason I'm your boss is because I inched upwards when the people above me got promoted," or left to better paying gigs. I'm literally a warm body in a suit that doesn't threaten anybody's position above me. I didn't get here because of my wits, Conrad confessed, his tone tinged with self-awareness. Trevor nodded thoughtfully as he gathered the cards, shuffling them absent-mindedly. Dominic was so good at stuff like this. I know. That's why I put him above you on the food chain, Conrad admitted. Trevor chuckled softly. Thanks for that vote of confidence. Hey, I had you in that position for a reason. You soaked up everything he taught you. And, not that it matters now, but in a few weeks, Dominic was going to get a promotion, and you were slated to step into his role, Conrad revealed. Really? Trevor's eyes widened in surprise. Yep, I have faith in you, Trevor. You can do this, Conrad affirmed. Trevor nodded, the weight of the situation sinking in as he continued shuffling the deck. Finally, a hint of amusement crossed his features. What is it? Conrad inquired, curious. If you're telling me the truth, that's awesome, and I appreciate the vote of confidence. If you're lying just to try and get me to believe in myself, that's probably the boldest thing I've seen you do in the last 3 years, Trevor remarked, a smirk playing on his lips. Conrad laughed, shaking his head. I can confidently say that's a secret I will take to my grave, which I hope isn't today, by the way, so you better come up with something good. Both men shared a moment of laughter before Trevor halted the card shuffling. With a flourish, he tossed the cards onto the table, a wide grin spreading across his face. You got an idea, don't you? Conrad observed, noticing Trevor's expression. I think I do. Come on, let's get the girls, Trevor replied eagerly. Rising from the table, the two men exited the break room and traversed the eerily quiet office floor. In the distance, Ashlyn stood by the window, her gaze fixed on the building opposite theirs. She struggled to eat, her eyes lingering on the office where her trivia buddy once sat. The room now lay vacant, marked only by an overturned desk and bloodstains on the window. On the couch, Sasha sat, her attention fixed on the television screen as she barely nibbled on her food, her gaze unblinking. Conrad and Trevor entered the room, both instinctively glancing at the television. The situation in Times Square had somehow worsened. Every store had been ransacked, but now, a significant portion of the creatures had dispersed. Well, that's looking better, Conrad remarked dryly. What are you talking about? Trevor asked, confusion evident in his voice. It's not as jam-packed as it was down there, Conrad explained. Which means those things are spreading out through the city, Ashlyn interjected, her tone grim. Oh, right, Conrad acknowledged. Conrad lowered his head, realizing he had inadvertently made a misstep in his comment. Meanwhile, Trevor approached Sasha on the couch, taking a seat beside her. Despite his presence, she remained transfixed on the television, her attention seemingly elsewhere. Sasha, are you doing okay, girl? Trevor inquired. However, she offered no response. Eventually, Trevor reached for the remote to switch off the TV, but Sasha intercepted his hand, pleading softly, please don't. Respecting her wishes, Trevor withdrew his hand and nodded, placing the remote back down. It seemed that the distraction of the television provided some form of solace for Sasha, and he didn't want to disrupt that. So do we know what we're doing? Since we just finished off the last of the food and all, Ashlyn prompted, breaking the silence. We can't stay here, because we'll just starve to death if we do. And it's pretty clear that nobody is coming to save us, at least not anytime soon. So we need 2 things, someplace that's secure to lay low and food. And I know where that is, Trevor declared. Ashlyn and Conrad fixed Trevor with a hopeful gaze, waiting for his plan. Where? Conrad asked eagerly. The cafeteria on 20, Trevor answered, but the hope in their eyes quickly dimmed. Sensing their disappointment, he hastened to reassure them. We have the window washer thing, so we can get down to the 20th floor, Trevor continued, trying to inject some optimism into his tone. Yeah, but how are we getting in? Ashlyn questioned. I'm not sure we have any way to break the window from the outside, Conrad added, echoing her concerns. As Dominic would often say, I'd rather be lucky than good. However, in this case, I'm both, Trevor remarked confidently. Have none of you been down to the 20th floor lately? Conrad and Ashlyn shook their heads in unison. That's why we had the intern. I knew that if I got into the elevator and started going down, I'd just head straight for the lobby and go home, Conrad admitted with a shrug. Fair enough, but really you guys should get out of the office more, Trevor teased lightly. Okay, stop with the suspense. What's your big reveal? Ashlyn urged, her curiosity piqued. Last month, they opened up the new patio eating area. And as luck would have it, the patio is on the correct side of the building, Trevor announced triumphantly. Ashlyn and Conrad exchanged a hopeful glance, their expressions brightening with newfound optimism. It will be a bit of a reach, but we can get to it. I know there's a storage room in the back that should have plenty of food. So if we can get to it, we might be able to ride it out until someone comes for us, Trevor explained, his voice tinged with determination. Ashlyn and Conrad, though still concerned, nodded in agreement. That's the best idea I've heard, Conrad remarked. I think it's the only play we have, Ashlyn added. Their attention turned to Sasha, who appeared to be listening but remained emotionally distant. Sasha? Girl? What do you think? Ashlyn prompted gently. Sasha let out a tear as she stared at the screen, her emotions overwhelming her. There's nobody alive in Times Square, is there? She whispered, her voice filled with sorrow. Trevor moved to sit beside her, wrapping his arm around her shoulders in a comforting gesture. No, Sasha, there's not, he replied softly, offering her solace. Another tear escaped Sasha's eye before she composed herself, reaching for the remote to switch off the television. I'm sorry. I was supposed to meet my sister and nephews down there for lunch the day this started. They were going early so they could do some shopping. Sasha's voice trailed off as Trevor pulled her into a comforting embrace, offering silent support in her moment of grief. We know, Sasha, you don't have to say anything, Trevor reassured her softly. I'll start getting the things we need, Conrad announced, taking charge of the task at hand. Trevor nodded in agreement as Conrad and Ashlyn departed, leaving Trevor to comfort Sasha. It took her a moment to collect herself before she sat up, determined to focus on the task ahead. Okay, I can cry later, right? Sasha asked, seeking confirmation. As much as you want, Trevor replied with a light-hearted tone, eliciting a small laugh from Sasha as she shook her head at his attempt to lighten the mood. Look at you, stepping up for the group, she remarked. Yeah, well, somebody has to. And besides, there's a coffee shop on 20, and I would literally kill for a cup right about now, Trevor joked. That's good, because you might have to, Sasha replied with a hint of seriousness. Would you like some help picking out a weapon? Trevor offered, his tone playful. Such a gentleman. Why, yes, sir. I would love some help picking out a weapon, Sasha responded with mock formality. Well, let's go do a little shopping then, Trevor quipped, getting up and offering his arm for Sasha to grab onto. Together they exited the office, preparing for the dangerous raid ahead. Chapter 8. The group gathered in the conference room, their attention drawn to the window washing rig outside. Are we sure this thing is going to hold us all? Ashlyn voiced her concern. If it can't handle our weight, then I don't see how anybody ever agreed to step foot in one for work. I think we'll be fine, Trevor reassured, his confidence unwavering. Agreeing with Trevor, everyone slowly filed out, with him leading the way to the controls. Once settled, Trevor gave them a nod. Here we go. With a pull of the lever, the rig began its descent, Conrad, Sasha, and Ashlyn gripping tightly, their unease palpable. After descending a couple of floors, Trevor halted abruptly, prompting mild panic from the others. What the hell is happening? Why aren't we moving? Conrad demanded. I need to check something before we go, Trevor replied cryptically, positioning himself flat on the rig and motioning for Conrad to hold his leg tightly. I will, as soon as you tell me what in the hell you're doing, Conrad retorted, his confusion growing. "We're just above the 32nd floor, and there's an open window. I need to make sure the coast is clear before we ride by. Unless you want to get tackled by one of those things," Trevor explained, his tone serious. Conrad thought for a moment before nodding at Trevor and complying with his request. With his legs securely holding Trevor in place, Trevor leaned over the edge, peering back towards the building and into the office they had breached earlier. A sigh escaped him as he spotted a trio of creatures lingering by the door. Pulling himself up but remaining prone on the floor of the rig, Trevor turned to Sasha, who was clutching her makeshift weapon tightly. "Let me have your broomstick for a moment," he requested. She nodded, handing it over cautiously, mindful not to accidentally jab him with its sharpened end. Trevor secured a firm grip on the broomstick before leaning over the edge and striking the side of the building with all his might. The sound reverberated, and within moments, he heard moans emanating from inside the building. 3 semi-fast-moving creatures emerged, drawn by the disturbance. One of them dashed out hastily, meeting a swift demise as it plummeted to the street below. However, the remaining 2 remained steadfastly clinging to the glass, reluctant to move. Trevor pondered for a moment before positioning himself directly in line with the window. Letting out a sharp whistle, Trevor captured their attention. As expected, one by one, they stumbled out of the window, falling while desperately reaching for him. Remaining vigilant, Trevor waited several moments after their falls to ensure no others approached. Satisfied that the coast was clear, he hoisted himself up and made his way back to the controls. Pressing his finger to his lips, he signaled for the others to maintain silence, a gesture they dutifully followed. The rig crept past the floor with the open window, everyone on edge as they peered inside, uncertain of what awaited them. Just as the washing rig cleared the floor, a lone creature near the office door caught sight of the movement. It emitted a low moan before charging towards them. Reacting swiftly, Conrad reached out and grabbed Sasha, pulling her into Ashlyn and both into himself. In a split second, the creature hurtled out of the window. Fortunately, the zombie's momentum carried it past the window washing rig, its legs grazing the railing as it sailed past them. Tensions ran high as everyone glanced upward, but they collectively relaxed as no further threats emerged from the floor. As they descended, relief washed over them, but their hearts sank with each passing floor as they peered into the windows. Floor by floor, they bore witness to the same scene over and over again. Creatures roamed unchecked, indulging in their insatiable hunger for flesh. Only a scant few floors appeared deserted, though signs of struggle lingered. "What floor are we at?" Ashlyn inquired, her voice tinged with unease. 24, Trevor replied. "It's empty," Ashlyn observed, her brows furrowing. "Maybe they tried the stairwell and didn't get lucky," Conrad suggested. "Or maybe they did," Ashlyn countered, her tone somber. A weighty silence fell over the group as they considered her words. "We can't be the only people who know about the 20th floor cafeteria," Ashlyn stated, her voice firm. The group acknowledged that Ashlyn was correct, understanding they had no choice but to press forward. After another tense minute, they arrived at the 20th floor. To their relief, the edge of the window washing rig aligned perfectly with the patio. Trevor slowed the rig to a halt, positioning it high enough to thwart the zombies' attempts to reach them but low enough for them to assess the situation below. Surveying the patio, Trevor noted its dimensions, 25 yards along the building's edge and 15 yards back to a set of glass doors. Relief washed over him as he observed the empty space, yet movement inside the building caught his attention. "Okay, listen up," Trevor addressed the group. "There's nothing on the patio, but I see movement inside. I can't imagine these doors are locked, so if we make too much noise, they'll be on us. I'll go over first and play defense. Once we're all over, we head inside and move to the right." "Where's the storage room?" Conrad inquired. "Somewhere on that side," Trevor replied. "The restaurants and coffee shop are over there, so it has to be there." "How many of them are there?" Ashlyn queried. "Enough to overwhelm us if we don't move. Trevor answered gravely, earning a nod of understanding from Ashlyn. "Okay, let's do this," Trevor declared, determination ringing in his voice. Trevor cautiously traversed the railing, descending onto the patio with his glass award weapon clutched tightly. He made space for the others, his gaze never wavering from the interior of the building. As he advanced, dread crept over him as he beheld the multitude of creatures inside, all poised for any sign of movement. Moments later, as Conrad assisted Ashlyn over the railing, she stumbled upon landing on the patio. Despite her efforts to regain her balance, she tumbled forward, colliding with a table and sending a chair crashing to the ground. Trevor's heart sank as he witnessed the immediate response, a horde of creatures sprinting towards them, drawn by the commotion. With swift reflexes, Trevor retreated a few steps, seizing Ashlyn and guiding her towards the opposite side of the patio. "We have to move," he urged. He glanced up just in time to witness Conrad's struggle to re-enter the window washing rig, despite Sasha's valiant attempts to assist him. Trevor couldn't afford to linger and watch if Conrad succeeded. With a firm tug on Ashlyn's arm, he urged them both in the direction they needed to go. Their feet pounded against the ground as they raced alongside the patio's perimeter, while the bulk of the zombies zeroed in on Conrad. Though Trevor couldn't see what transpired, anguished cries filled the air as he and Ashlyn sprinted toward the distant door. As they neared the entrance, a ghastly creature charged straight at them. Trevor acted swiftly, timing his move to shove the door open just as the ghoul reached it, driving it forcefully into its face. The impact sent the creature stumbling backward, granting Trevor the opportunity to dart inside and wield his weapon. The sound of its skull cracking echoed across the blood-drenched cafeteria floor. As the creature collapsed, they turned their gaze toward the majority of the horde making their way outside, drawn by the commotion near the rig. Although Conrad and Sasha remained obscured from view, the rig struggled to ascend, besieged by several creatures clinging to it and violently shaking its frame. Yet, they couldn't afford to dwell on Sasha's uncertain fate, for they faced their own dire predicament. A dozen zombies still lurked within, their focus squarely fixed on them, swiftly navigating through the labyrinth of tables and chairs. "Look, a hallway," Ashlyn exclaimed. Ashlyn gestured urgently towards a narrow hallway wedged between the coffee shop and a neighboring restaurant to their right. Without hesitation, they veered in that direction, their strides quickening in a desperate bid to outpace the encroaching horde. Just ahead of the advancing mob, the pair reached the entrance to the hallway. Dim light filtered in, revealing an empty corridor stretching towards a single door at its end. Positioned a few yards back from the hallway's threshold, Trevor braced himself for the impending confrontation. "Go get that door open," he instructed without preamble. Ashlyn didn't hesitate or argue. She pivoted swiftly and sprinted toward the door with all her might. Trevor stood his ground as the zombies surged toward him, his mind racing to formulate a plan. With the narrow confines of the hallway limiting his options, he resolved to simply hold them off as best he could. Swiftly, he repositioned the glass award, ensuring its pointed tip faced outward. As the lead creature barreled toward him, he braced himself, aligning the award with its chest. The impact drove the trophy deep into the creature's torso, its base securing firmly against its flesh. Yet the violent thrashing of the wounded ghoul sent Trevor reeling, the creature's flailing limbs striking him as he struggled to maintain control over the creature blocking the advancing horde. Meanwhile, Ashlyn darted towards the storage room door, her hands fumbling with the knob in a frantic attempt to open it. Her hopes dashed as she realized it was locked. "No, no, no," she exclaimed in frustration. Ashlyn jiggled the doorknob in a desperate attempt to will the stubborn door open, but to no avail. Frustration mounting, she resorted to banging on the door while calling out, her voice tinged with urgency and pleading. "Please, if someone is in there, please let us in. We're not those things. Please," she implored, tears welling in her eyes as she continued to hammer on the unyielding door, her gaze darting back to Trevor, who was beginning to falter under the relentless assault of the mob. To her astonishment, the sound of movement within reached her ears, accompanied by a faint voice. Moments later, the The door swung open, revealing 3 figures inside, a man and 2 women. "Get in here," the man urged, his voice urgent. Without hesitation, Ashlyn turned and shouted to Trevor. "The door is open," she exclaimed, her voice echoing down the hallway to where Trevor fought valiantly against the encroaching horde. Trevor stole a quick glance over his shoulder, spotting Ashlyn's frantic waving. His muscles screamed under the weight of the advancing horde, now 15 strong, their relentless force driving him backward. With determination etched on his face, Trevor seized a moment of opportunity. As the lead zombie teetered precariously, lifted by the throng behind it, he summoned his strength and thrust the glass award upward with all his might. The creature lurched forward, off balance, and crashed to the ground as Trevor made his escape down the hallway, narrowly avoiding the creature's flailing limbs. As he approached the doorway, the man and Ashlyn stood anxiously, their faces reflecting the terror of the situation. With footsteps closing in behind him, Ashlyn and the man stepped aside, allowing Trevor to sprint past them. He crashed through the door at full speed, hurtling toward the back of the room and nearly colliding with one of the women in his path. Once inside, the man swiftly slammed the door shut and locked it tight. "Help me get those boxes over here," the man called out, his voice urgent. With a sense of urgency, everyone sprang into action, hastily barricading the door with heavy boxes. After several tense moments, a semblance of security settled over the room. "Thank you," Trevor breathed out, still struggling to regain his composure. The man's demeanor remained intense as he issued his next command. "Arms up and spin around, now." Without hesitation, Trevor and Ashlyn complied, submitting to the inspection. Upon finding no injuries, the man nodded approvingly and motioned for them to lower their arms. "I'm sorry, but those bites are nasty," the man remarked gravely. "Tell me about it," Trevor replied with a wry grin. "Where in the holy hell did you 2 come from?" the man inquired incredulously. 35, Trevor answered cryptically. "Are you shitting me? You fought down 15 flights of stairs?" the man exclaimed in disbelief. Trevor smirked, shaking his head. "Not exactly. We borrowed the window washer's rig." The man paused, contemplating Trevor's revelation before letting out a chuckle. "Not bad. Not bad at all." The man signaled to the 2 women, who swiftly fetched bottled water and passed them to Trevor and Ashlyn. "Well, the good news is, you didn't make the trip in vain," the man began, a hint of reassurance in his tone. "We do have food and water and a sink in the corner, so whenever you down those bottles, make sure to refill them." "And the bad news?" Trevor inquired, bracing himself for the other shoe to drop. "With you 2 here, we have maybe 3 weeks' worth of food, so if someone hasn't come for us by then, we're in a heap of trouble," the man revealed solemnly, his words hanging heavy in the air. Trevor and Ashlyn exchanged concerned glances as the man continued with another piece of unwelcome news. "Oh, and there's no bathroom in here. So pee in the sink and get really used to using a coffee can," he added matter-of-factly. The revelation elicited a collective grimace from the room's occupants. "Other than that, welcome," the man concluded, his attempt at levity not lost on the group. "I don't suppose you brought a deck of cards or anything, did you? There's not a lot to do in here besides stare at each other, and to be honest, that lost its appeal a couple days ago." Trevor couldn't help but smirk as he produced a deck of cards from his pocket. "Hell yeah, man," the man exclaimed with genuine enthusiasm. "Just remember this when it comes time to decide who to eat," Trevor quipped, injecting a bit of dark humor into the moment. Laughter filled the room as Trevor and Ashlyn collapsed onto the ground, their exhaustion mingling with a sense of relief. Despite the grim reality of their situation and the loss of their friends and coworkers, they found solace in the knowledge that, for at least a few weeks, they were safe. The end.